All right, so this is where we are. Okay, at the top, a programmer sees only high-level language, and maybe some smarter programmer can see, some systems, maybe OS or compiler, etc., etc., right? But at the bottom, we have just digital design. I mean, if you look at any computer, it consists of what? It consists of gates, okay, and some maybe wires and few, basically sequential logic and combination logic. And below that, if you go, you have just electrons. Okay, so it means that anything that you are going to design, you have to create a system between the abstracted thing that a programmer will see and something that these basic logic gates can execute. Okay, and this is where all the challenges are, and every system differs only in this aspect. Say, for example, hardware view of hardware designers view of computer, how computer system work could be very different from what a programmer will actually see. Okay, so our task in the course is to see what happens in between. So we are not going to go in this course about logic gate design, a sequential circuit design, combinational circuit design. We'll look at only at the certain elements like CPU or ALU and memory and so on, and try to build system around that. Okay. So how does an assembly program end up executing as a digital logic? Okay. So essentially we have high level program, and then we use compiler to create assembly language program, and that assembly language program is converted into machine language program, and that machine language program runs over hardware, right, using logic gates and wire. Okay, so what is in between? Do all computers have everything same in between, or do they have different? And what are those different things? Okay, this is what we are going to focus. All right. Okay, so there is something called microarchitecture. This is essentially how hardware is actually designed, something that goes below assembly language program, and we'll look at that thing in next few classes. All right, here it is. So let's start with first thing first, which is instruction. And we have already studied the instruction, right? Instruction, when we say instruction, we are not talking about high level language, or for example in C language what an instruction is. I am looking right now at assembly language instruction. Okay, so assembly language instruction is something which is a fundamental unit of work. Okay, we have already discussed this. What's important is that we have also studied is in stored program concept. The instruction and data look exactly like this. It's left only to interpret what is data and what is instruction, because underneath in hardware level it's only zeros and ones. Now, but instructions generally are of fixed length. Okay, the instruction size is either of 32 or 16 or 64. The most popular one so far has been 32. Now people are moving towards 64. All new Intel chipset, for example, is of 64-bit size. Okay. Okay, so we'll look at how instruction length really impacts overall design of system. Then of course we have looked at control unit that interprets instruction and generate control signal. So last example of LC3, we have seen that how for each instruction different control signals are generated. Okay, and third point, important point about instruction is always atomic in nature. It means it executes fully or does not execute at all. All right. So let's look at ISA. Then ISA is nothing but instructions, computer instruction, which is assembly language instruction or machine level instruction. And what are the formats? What does a particular instruction do? Okay, it means that ISA will define set of instruction, different instructions, and set of things which are visible to a programmer. So let's look at that. So instruction set is nothing but set of instructions. Okay, we'll come back to this little later. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, so we have now same thing, the earlier diagram that we've seen, we are looking at from different perspective, and we'll see where ISA and microarchitecture will fit in. So at the top here we have some problem to be solved, right? Say for example, you're running a program for a specific task, say doing some calculation. Then what, and at the bottom we have electrons. Okay, then from the problem we define algorithm. Problem is something in mind, some task is to be done, right? And then computer cannot understand your thoughts, right? You have to define very precisely. Okay, then algorithm has certain properties. What are those properties? Is a step-by-step procedure, and each step does something very finite. Okay, you cannot, so whatever it does is very, very well defined. It's a finite, it's a definite in nature. It means that every time you execute the same instruction, it does exactly the same thing. Okay, and at the end, using multiple instructions in sequence, you get effective computability, you get the results. Okay, so there could be one problem, and but algorithms could be many, right? Everyone can create different algorithm. And once you have defined algorithms, then you have to code it in program language, right? And you can use whatever programming language you think suitable for the problem solving, right? And below that we have runtime systems. Runtime system is what, like operating system, memory management system, and virtual machine. And below this sits ISA. Okay, so ISA, so up to this point, it means that up to this point, that's problem, algorithm, programming language, that's doing writing program, and OS, all are visible to programmer. Okay, so ISA is something that is visible to programmer, which defines assembly language instructions and certain other things we will see later. But something below this is not visible to us, okay, as a programmer, right? So that is, so it means that ISA is interface between software and hardware, and what a programmer assumes, so something that a programmer assumes the corresponding hardware has to do. Okay, it means that ISA will tell everything about the system that a programmer can use. All right, but what is underneath is not visible to programmer. It means that this is implementation of microarchitecture, implementation of ISA, which is called microarchitecture. Okay, so yesterday class we have seen how we have executed certain instruction in LC3. Okay, where a control unit has generated control signals, and then as a result of control signals, data movement happens, right? Or data manipulation happens. So all that comes inside our microarchitecture, because how control signals are generated is not visible to a programmer in any system. All right. So, and then below microarchitecture, we have logic gates, okay, logic circuits, right? Say for example, gates, and devices, right? Within logic circuits, say for example, adder, you have carry ripple adder, then it will have certain gates inside that, right? So that's all. This is all what we do in a computer system. Okay, now rest of the course, of course we will look also at some aspects of C, but rest of the course will focus on ISA and microarchitecture. All right. Okay, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, you understood the concept? Any question? Any question up to this point? Yes or no?
No, sir.
Okay, all right. Let's move ahead then. Then let's define ISA, and let's also discuss little bit of microarchitecture. Okay, So ISA is agreed upon interface between hardware and software. Okay, it specifies how programmers see instruction to be executed. Now, when I say instructions in general, I am talking about assembly language instruction, because as a C programmer, it doesn't matter to you what the machine is, or Python programmer, right? I mean, you may not know even, right, what computer you are running. So there's a level of abstraction given to us, very powerful abstraction, but finally, to the level to which the programmer can go down is assembly language program. Okay, so now when you are doing programming in assembly, then you'll have to know how many registers are there, what is the instruction set, whether there's an instruction for adding, subtraction, floating point, or whatever, right? All these things you need to know. Okay. So essentially, ISA is what software writer needs to know to write and debug system and user program. Again, I'm telling when software writer is essentially means that any programmer that even writes program in higher level language but compiles into assembly language, and then he wants to know how this program is executing. And microarchitecture is a specific implementation of ISA. Now the word specific here is very important, because ISA, once you define interface, the power of interface is that then anything below you can change without impacting something on top. Okay, so if you retain the same ISA, same assembly language program, assembly language instruction, and other things that are visible to a programmer, and keep changing the hardware inside, okay, then it does not impact. It means that the program that you have written will continue to execute. Although more and more powerful, hardware will keep coming in. Okay, so microarchitecture can execute instruction in any order as long as it obeys the semantics specified by ISA when making instruction results visible to the software. All right. So this ISA gives essentially an interface. Okay, on top, programmers have a certain view, but underneath it can do all the magics it wants. For example, we have discussed that one human architecture execute instruction in a sequence, one instruction after others instruction, and so on and so forth, right? However, most of the processors today don't execute instruction in sequence. Why? You have written program using some logic, sequential logic, right? One after other and so on. But suppose you have written, there is a one instruction followed by another instruction which has nothing to do with previous instruction. Okay, in that case, you can execute the second instruction first if processor has computing available, and use the result later. Okay, so that is called out of order execution. Not necessarily, while one human architecture defines that your instruction will be executed one after other, and that's how you write program, but underneath, microarchitecture is free to do all kinds of optimization, and one optimization that we'll study is that out of order execution of instructions. Okay. So what we can say is that microprocessor in general or processor in general consists of ISA, microarchitecture, and circuits. All right. And on top of that, we have various abstractions like program, algorithms, problem, OS, etc., to make our life better. All right. Any question up to this point?
So who provides the ISA?
Oh, very good point. Is the one who is designing the processor. We'll come to this in just another minute. Okay. Okay, just before that, I will come to you. Okay, let's take a few examples of ISA versus microarchitecture. See, gas pedal that we call accelerator in general, right? In a car, there is accelerator pedal and there's a brake, and of course, if you are using a geared car, then you have clutch. Okay, so accelerator is an interface given to you. Okay, and all cars have accelerator. Maybe slightly different in design and feel, etc., but all have accelerator. Okay, and this is nothing but interface for acceleration. But how acceleration happens inside? I mean, every car has different built-in, you know, built-in engine and other parts, right? Your engine could be just a petrol engine or diesel engine. It could be electrical engine. It's a mix of. It could be hybrid engine. It could be turbo engine, and so on and so forth, right? So the implementation of that specification could be different. Okay. Similarly, because average driver may not know what is inside below. There's a survey that about 70–80% people in Western countries never open the hood of the car. I mean, India, of course, you can see on the roadside people opening, but with new cars, you don't need to open hood, right? With time of ambassadors and Fiats, everyone used to know. So similarly, in case of ISA, once ISA is well defined, okay, and when technology improvements happen, then underneath hardware can change. For example, if ISA says that 2 integer to be added and result is to be available, whether you are doing bit serial adder or ripple carry adder or carry look ahead adder or some new kind of adder that comes in, you can always fit into that. Now, one example is that x86 has defined its ISA long back, right? So around 30 years back. Whenever they defined it, okay? And then they keep on improving their hardware, right? As because of improvement in semiconductor technology, better and better technologies evolved. Okay, and then they have moved from 286 to 386 to 486 to Pentium, Pentium Pro, Pentium 4, and so on without changing the ISA. Okay, now hardware technology, as we have seen in Moore's law, that hardware technology changes, because number of transistors changing, the whole technology is changing, and there are other architectural advances. So microarchitecture changes very fast, where ISA remains fixed. Now, the reason for that is that if you change ISA, then everything that you have done on top has to change. Then compiler has to change, the OS has to change, then all programs that you are, written considering those, those assembly language programs will also change. All right. So it is. So normally when ISA is designed with a lot of thought and remains constant for some time, because it provides hardware a backward compatibility. Or program you write today, suppose you have written a program and then you compile it, object code is available, you execute it on a system, and tomorrow you want it to, you change the machine from old say Intel machine to new Intel machine, and then you want it to run because you have spent money. Okay, so that's the reason ISA remains almost same, or even if ISA changes, then changes in such a way that older programs will run. All right, so let's move ahead. So the answer we have given. Okay, so number of ISAs available are, for example, x86 from Intel. Then ARM has produced beautiful RISC architecture. Then RISC itself, I mean, now with University of Berkeley has come out with RISC-4. This started from RISC-2, 3, 4, and now this is open sourced. Okay, all these ISAs we know because programmers need to program. We know instruction set, but below that, what all is happening is a black box to all of us, right? So none of these companies have exposed their ISAs, excepting for the RISC, which is coming up now with all the implementations. Is it clear to you? Okay. So underneath the microarchitectural execution model of all implementation could differ. Okay, so and it may not follow the laws, right? One human architecture model, right? So for example, we can have pipelined instruction execution. Different in say 80486, then Pentium use multiple instructions at a time execution. So it means that can we execute two instructions at a time, or it will find out parallelism in your program and execute them together. Then Intel Pentium Pro had out of order execution, means that second or third instruction could be executed first if there is no dependency. And then there is a how to utilize, for example, instruction on data caches. Okay, so the message is that what happens underneath ISA is not consistent, it's largely technology dependent, and one human model is not exposed to the software. Okay, so something that's wrong, I shouldn't say wrong, something so below ISA, if the designer is not following one human model, it's okay as long as the interface that's given to you at the top and in your mind is a sequential execution. If as long as that is satisfied, then it's okay to design a microarchitecture in any way that the programmer or designer wants. Okay, all right.
Sir, I didn't get the last point you made.
What is that last point?
Sir, that as long, sir, as long as that sequential model thing something.
Okay, so you are designing your program in certain way. Okay, your assumption is that instruction will be executed one after other, right? A is equal to B plus C, then you have next instruction and third instruction and so on. Now when you say A is equal to B plus C and second instruction is D is equal to E plus F, okay, the second instruction has nothing to do with first instruction. You agree?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now why can't these two be executed in parallel? Or for example, first instruction is waiting for something. Say for example, first instruction load register A. Okay, and they bring the data from memory. So it will take say 30-40 cycles. And next instruction is has nothing to do with A. It says that say C is or D is equal to E plus F. Okay, while your program is your machine is waiting for data to come from memory, why not execute something that can be executed? Now, this out of order instruction execution is not visible to you as a programmer, right? Is
Yes,
it clear?
Yes, I understand.
So then, of course, the smarter way of designing marker architecture is that, find out what can be done faster and maybe out of order, or maybe in pipeline manner, or maybe parallelly. Okay, so there's a point. Okay, good that you asked the question. Okay, so then what ISA contains? Now, remember that we have said that ISA contains something that is visible to a programmer. Okay, so the ISA will, so when you're writing a program, you should know instructions. Within instruction, you should know what kind of operation is doing, that's opcode like add, subtract, multiply, floating point or whatever. And then it should have various address modes. Now you have, if you look at the instruction, you have opcode, it means that what we are doing, and then operands. Okay, operands, how these operands are to be fetched, how these operands are to be addressed is defined by addressing mode. Okay, say for example, you have addressing mode which is register. It means that everything is in register. Like when you say register A and register B is to be added and then move to register C, it means that addressing mode is your register type. Now if you are bringing data from memory, then memory address has to be calculated. Then there's a different kind of addressing mode. So there are a large number of addressing modes have been defined, and we'll study them in detail when we study RISC architecture. Okay. So there are various instruction types and their formats. Okay. Now we'll look at them as well. There are, say, instruction types could be, it could be, for example, just addition, multiplication, or kind of instruction, or it could be memory reading instruction or storing instruction or something else, right? So there are some machines that will say that instead of doing simple tasks, you just do, say, add two strings or two arrays, right? Concatenate two strings or add two arrays, or do matrix multiplication. All this is in assembly language program. There's a possibility, right? And there have been machines that have been designed for these kind of tasks. Now we'll come to this again. Registers, of course, we studied. Then memory, it means that how many registers are there, what are their sizes, all to be defined. Okay, what is memory? Address space, that is to be defined, right? And so on, right? And so address space, addressability, alignment, that's a little endian or big endian. Virtual memory management, memory hierarchy we have seen, that is to also be defined. Okay, apart from that, this ISA will also define call, interrupt, exception handling, access control, priority privileges, instruction types, whether it's IO is happening using memory mapped way or instruction way. We'll again study this. Task and thread management can also be defined. Okay, power and thermal, if there is instruction to manage power of a processor, okay, for example, you may want to run single thread at very high speed rather than running multiple threads, then you can define that also, right? And if there is an instruction corresponding to that, then it will be part of ISA. Okay, and so on. Okay, so first thing let's see that, okay, here we set data types. We'll discuss only a few of them, right? What kind of data types we have? See, in simplest possible RISC architecture, there are just one or two types of data types we'll study, largely integers. Okay, now other machines have integer type, floating type, 2's complement integer type, characters, binary, decimal, BCD, etc., right? And then there have been machines that have been designed with extremely complex data structures like doubly linked list, queue, string, a bit vector, stack, okay, and so on and so forth, right? Even one machine has defined hash table. Now there are two philosophies. First philosophy is that you create this instruction in assembly to do a lot of things, lot of complex things, and have data structure which is again very complex. Okay, now that was the philosophy that was used earlier because most of the programming was done in assembly. Something around 50-60 years back, at high level language were not evolved, compilers were not so smart, and people are doing programming largely in assembly. Now assembly language, so all these constructs that you see today in higher level language were available in assembly language. Okay, now once it's in assembly language, then hardware has to do this very efficiently, right? Sometimes thinking is that you can specialize hardware to do these things. Now then something around 30 years back, 20 years back, the RISC model came, which says rather than making instruction set complex, let's simplify this. Okay, because anything that you want to do, even matrix multiplication or addition of array or something, can be done by simple instructions, right? Simple operations. Okay, so now there has been tendency or trend to move towards from complex instruction set with complex data structures to very simple instructions, and idea is that simple things can run faster, and we'll come to that philosophy a little later. Now again people have started thinking, because philosophy has been to create better general purpose processor, okay, which can do multiple things. Then RISC ideally fit into. Now people have started again debating, now I want to make processor to run a particular specific application, very specific application. For example, I want to do only AI. Okay, then if I want to do AI, then I will do most of the time matrix multiplication. Then why not matrix has to be a data type in my assembly language program? Once it's there in assembly language instruction, the instruction corresponding to matrix multiplication or matrix manipulation, then hardware has to be designed to efficiently to that task. So could be, right? So the point I'm making is that while people have been debating about CISC versus RISC, and this debate keeps on going. So, but the one that we'll consider in our course is will be RISC. Okay, the addressing mode we discuss is the way we access the operands, right? These are the register only we have already seen. When you say add to register, say R1, R2, R3, it means R2 and R3 to be added, move to register 1, R1, then we call it register only. Immediate is something that instruction contains the value. Say for example, load into register some value. Okay, say load into register, say R1, the value 100. Then 100 is specified right in the instruction, that we call immediate. Then something called base addressing, wherein there is some value given in some register, which we call it base, and then add to that some index, that we call base addressing. Similarly, PC program counter, you add some displacement and then get the final value. And then we have pseudo direct, which is called jump and JL. So don't worry about it. We'll spend a lot of time on this one. And there are some other addressing modes like direct, indirect, stack, index, and register indirect. And there may be another 15, 20. Okay. And we are not going to look at this. If you're interested, I can provide you some references. Okay, any question on up to this part?
Sir, I had a question.
Yes, please.
Sir, you said that they shifted from writing data structures in assembly language to delegating the task to higher level languages. But I didn't see how did that provide us faster implementation of data structures.
Okay, so basically data types I'm talking, not really, so kind of data structure, right? Data types. So see what happens underneath hardware. Okay, if you design for matrix multiplication. Okay, so hardware design you would have seen, right, in the course, right? Now hardware, what do we have? We have essentially arithmetic logic unit and few other things, right? Now, can you design a hardware which will do a particular task more efficiently? Because most of the time you are doing this. Yes, we can do that, right? We can do that. I mean, like GPU, we have studied, right? Main central processor, a processor, and corresponding GPU. Most PCs have a GPU. Now, GPU is designed for certain type of application which is related to image processing, vision, and and AI and so on. AI GPUs are separately coming nowadays. Now that ISA for that, if you try to see, if you go to NVIDIA site and see what is the ISA for GPU, then you will find all these instructions. Okay, at assembly language. So that data type you will find. All right, because hardware implementation corresponding, see, we have seen in GPU, for example, rather than having one or two cores, one or two processors, it has thousands of processors, which will do certain tasks parallelly, which is repetitive tasks like in matrix multiplication, etc. Right? Okay. All right, got it?
Sir, but the question was that you told that there was a philosophy that we need to shift to take this task to higher level languages. We don't need to do it in assembly and specialize. So what was the advantage behind that?
So if you see what happens is that when you design hardware, what are you designing it for? So in general, the processor that we use here on laptop or etc. is designed to do hundreds of things. And a priori, nobody knows what kind of program you're running. If it's, say, for example, image processing or matrix multiplication or AI, then it will finally convert these instructions into your algorithm, whatever you write, convert into some assembly language instructions. Okay, and this assembly language instruction will, if there are few, they will be executed sequentially, right? Okay, because processor is single processor here. Assumption is that there is a single processor and then its execution is happening sequentially. Now, okay, instead of that, if an instruction allow, that's a, if your assembly language instruction allows implementation, that, you know, if you are creating a GPU, then you can do matrix multiplication in just few steps because there are thousands of processors working parallelly on that problem, right? Then why not do that? Because then you get speed up. The question is that, you know, you may want to, what is your ultimate objective? Program will be executed, your algorithm that you have designed for matrix multiplication will be executed also on a regular computer, but performance that you get out of it could be very different than on GPU, right? So then when you write compiler, for example, of course you will have to write program always in higher level language, even in, you know, when you want to use a specialized processor. But you know, the compiler will convert that into assembly language program that uses special instructions, and those instructions are implemented because it's a special purpose computer. Okay, all right. Then it defines, ISA also defines memory organization, right? I mean, address space, how many, what is address space? Like, we said that if word size is 32 bits, then address space will be 2 raised power 32. Or that's a maximum value of 2 raised power 30, and so on. It's a byte addressable or word addressable. It's big endian or little endian, support for virtual memory, and so on, right? So all these things will be answered. Then number of operands, there are instructions with 0 operand, which could be stack machine. We'll not study that. There are machines with just 1 operand. There are machines which where instructions have 2 operands, like where source and destination is the same register. Say, for example, you say add A and B and move the data to add to A, right? So A comes twice. It means that you don't need 3 registers, but you need 2 registers, and so on, right? So we'll study largely RISC architecture, which is mainly 3 operand. It has at least, it has 3 operands. There are some instructions, it could have also 2 operands in RISC. Okay, we'll study that. We have already studied how many concept of registers. Now question in ISA is that how many registers we can have. More the register, better it is, because more data you can bring it to registers, and registers are very fast. Again, then what is the size of register? It's a 32-bit 64. Normally, whatever is word size is the register size in general. Okay. Having a register is good idea. Yes, it is very good idea because of the same reason we are using caches, which is data locality and spatial locality and temporal locality. And time-wise, same instruction we execute multiple times. And then if you are executing instruction 1, then there's a possibility that you run instruction 2, 3, 4, right? The instruction which are adjacent to each other can be, you know, corresponding to that can be brought into register, and registers are at least 10 to maybe 5 to 10 times faster than the cache memory, because registers are built directly into the hardware. Okay, so we have discussed about ISA. Then let's discuss about the microarchitecture. As we discussed, microarchitecture is nothing but implementation of ISA. So that is something goes inside, for example, pipelining, in order execution, out of order execution of instruction, memory access scheduling policy, clock gating, caching, what are different size of caches, and so on, right? You can define, right? So anything that we are defining here should be visible to the programmer. So caches can be defined, may not be defined. Okay, if assembly language program or assembly language instruction has an instruction corresponding to any one of these, then it's part of ISA. Then it's part of ISA. Otherwise, it has to be implemented. So all these things are to be implemented in microarchitecture if it's not defined in ISA. Now, question here is that we have discussed about voltage and frequency scaling, right? that we have to, in order to reduce the power, we have to manage voltage and frequency. Now, when we are running, say, just single program, and I want very fast execution of that, I am using single thread, then I may want to increase voltage and frequency as a programmer. Do I have that feature available in assembly language instruction? If yes, it's part of ISA. If no, or if system is doing it automatically, then it is part of microarchitecture. Similarly, error correction. So something that is not defined in assembly language instruction or assembly instruction or ISA is part of microarchitecture. That's the philosophy. Okay, now I am asking you a few questions. Add instruction, when you say add A, B, C, okay, is it part of ISA or or microarchitecture? Anyone? Add instruction is part of ISA. We discussed that, right? Because visible to programmer. Okay. Number of general purpose registers. I should know if I am doing assembly language programming. So it's part of ISA. Number of ports in register file. We'll look at what port is little later. This is actually hardware implementation. So it's not. You can have any number of ports you want, because so as a programmer, it's not visible to them. It's a part of microarchitecture. Number of cycles to execute any instruction, say multiplication instruction. It's not visible to programmer. Programmer knows only about instruction. How actually it's implemented is a one cycle or multiple cycle is not visible to programmer. So it's part of microarchitecture. Whether machine employs pipeline instruction execution, how deep is the pipeline, is part of microarchitecture. I mean, programmer will never come to know, when you write program, you don't even know, it has pipeline. Similarly, assembly language programmer will know, you will never know. So we can say that microarchitecture is implementation of ISA under very specific design constraint and goals. Okay, now if you are asked to design an ISA, how will you design it? Now there is a various factor you have to consider, right? For example, cost. Performance, the cost could be different of implementation of various ISAs. Performance could be very different, right? Because you are taking complex instructions, simple instruction, and so on. Number of operands, cost could be very different. Power consumption. Do you think ISA for your mobile set architecture, in your mobile phone, there is a chip or processor, that ISA will be same as ISA of Intel chip that you have in your laptop? Surely not. Okay, because your mobile set processor ISA will have instruction corresponding to energy consumption. Then availability, availability is similar to reliability. How much time machine is available? Okay, and time to market. So if you design something very fancy, etc., etc., it may take few years for design. Okay, and then all these factors depend on the application space that we are trying to do, right? Say for example, okay, just before this, for example, application could be scientific applications, it could be transaction based application, it could be networking application, GPU graphics based application, embedded application, and so on. Then we have to look at the application. For example, is for mobile. Now mobile handset ISA 10 years back was different from today. Why? Where most of the use of handset today is not for making phone call. Okay, most of the use of mobile phone today is to watch video. Okay, then of course the processor design has to be different. All right. So, and this leads to different set of demands and trade-off. Okay, what application we are using, and then based on that we have various constraints that we have listed here. Okay, and then we design the ISA. All right. Now coming here, now these things are changing continuously. Problem, algorithms, and for what problem you want to solve, right? And the usage, etc., is completely changing. Okay, and then based on that, and user has these touch points. Okay, then ISA in general remains fixed, and then if for a certain period of time, but if this problem changes continuously, say for example nowadays we are doing largely video processing application, then this part has also to change, and corresponding microarchitecture will also change. But the change in ISA is very slow compared to change in microarchitecture. And it means that entire thing, the philosophy now is that entire thing has to optimize for users, okay, or for certain type of applications. Now, when we say in general about ISA, it means that we talk of Intel ISA or ARM ISA. These have been designed for very specific application in mind, like Intel, everything that they have designed and they have been successful is around a PC or server. Okay, ARM is successful only in what space? The ARM is successful only in mobile space. All handsets have ARM processor. So their ISA is designed for that. And they have been implemented very well, while Intel has failed miserably in designing or creating chips that will go into mobile handsets. They have created, but it was a big failure because their design philosophy was not really suiting to needs of users. Okay, okay, this we have already covered. And then there are instructions of various formats that we will study a little later. And these are instruction set for different processors. These are, I don't want to get into these, but I just want to illustrate the point that ISA, there are various kinds of ISA, like ISA for ARM, which just looks very clean. ISA for learning machine 3, learning computer 3 that we have studied in detail. This is very simple, only for learning purpose. Okay, and then Intel, I wanted to here have one slide of Intel, but I couldn't fit into one page because Intel is just too complex. And this graph shows number of instructions that has gone in. Right, today there are 1200 instructions that they have. And and if I try to look at their manual, it's 3,800 pages. Who is going to read this? And that makes compiler very complex. And they have very complex instruction set architecture. And that's the reason they are successful, because none of us want to move from Intel processor. When you're buying a laptop, you may want to have Intel processor. And they are yet successful. But we'll have to see how long they will remain successful. Okay, so we will now come to a very simple question that I'm going to ask you, and then we'll stop. I will take another 2 minutes. Today we have used Zoom. Okay, and if you see, Zoom will take between 1 Mbps, megabits per second, to 2 megabits per second. And there's a lot of graphics. Now, possibly our session will be less than that. So now we have fiber. So even this data is coming over fiber, because in my home, fiber is terminating. A typical fiber can carry how many Zoom sessions? 100 sessions? Means 100 into 1 Mbps, 100 Mbps, 1000 sessions, 1000 Mbps, or 10,000, 1 million session, 10 million session, 100 million sessions. Any thinking? Any thought?
10,000.
Okay, anybody else? Okay. Okay, do you know that whole Bangalore's traffic, or I would say the whole state's traffic, internet traffic, can go over a fiber? That's the capacity of single fiber. Now, we are not using, even when a fiber, when I say fiber is coming to my home and I am using it for only, say, for 10 Mbps, I am not using its 1 millionth part of the capacity that's available. Okay, the answer is this: 100 million sessions. Okay, and if you go to this particular paper, you'll get the answer, right? So it's a almost, I don't know how many terabit speed, but you can get. So that is a capacity of a fiber. Imagine thousands of fibers running in each street. Okay, that is the capacity of fiber, right? And that is the reason, both computing has grown fast, Moore's law, and then at the same time, bandwidth has grown, but the bandwidth has been slower, right? And there is a law called Nielsen's law, which says that bandwidth grows 50% per year. Okay, close to 50%. This is 10% less than Moore's law in general. But I mean, I was paying 50 rupees per minute phone call charges when it came, mobile phone came in sometimes in 95. Okay, and whole IIT Delhi where I studied was connected over 64 kbps link, to some place in Mumbai. Okay, that was, and since then, something that has changed the bandwidth is nothing but, I would think, that technology changes happen in optical side and also Ethernet, I would think. And something, of course, last mile, we can say always wireless, but something that is inside, there's a fiber has tremendous amount of capacity, right? And that's the reason we call it dark fiber, because most of the fiber is dark or unused. All right, so that's all for today. Any question?